All right, so I want to show you some ways to blend images in, um, and a couple other, I guess, tips here. So you probably don't know this. All right, once we start getting images on here, like let's say I wanted to select that tower, I can't just click on it. I have to go over to my layer panel and find out which layer that is on. Okay, so um, but a quicker way to do this, if you hold down the command button on your keyboard, which is right next to the space bar, and you just click. So on a PC, I believe it's control. You can just click then and select what it is that you're trying to get. All right, so very valuable keyboard shortcut. So that on a Mac is command and click, and I believe on a PC it is control click. So that's a good quick way to select things. You'll also notice in my layer panel here that I have some folders. So when we're creating things like maybe a set of walls or something, all right, it's nice to be able to organize these things, put it into folders. One, it's visually easier to read your layer panel, but it also saves space. So instead of having all these layers and then having to scroll through all this stuff, we can just have it condensed into groups. All right, so to make a folder, it's at the bottom of your layer panel, looks like a folder. If you hover over it, it says create a new group. You can click on that, and then you can just name it, whatever you want to call it. And to put a layer in there, we just click it and drag it. If you hover it over the folder, it will go in there. There we go. All right, notice how this layer is indented a little bit. That tells us it's inside of this folder. All right, so I'm going to try to blend this in a little bit because you can see there's not much. It's very abrupt, okay, from one image to the next. So one tool that we have available to us is the eraser tool. Keyboard shortcut for that's the letter E for eraser. And it's about halfway down, looks like a picture of an eraser. We can take that tool and just do a quick check on the settings here. Up top, we want to click this, and this is important. So this is our brush settings. There's multiple tools in Photoshop that use a brush. We want to make sure that the hardness is set to 0 for blending. All right, that's going to give us a fade, a soft brush. If we had a hard brush, it's going to give a very defined edge, which is not what we want for blending. So that's up there. And we can adjust the size of this brush by using the bracket keys on your keyboard. It's next to the letter P. So the one bracket will make it smaller and the other bracket will make it bigger. And now we can just kind of feather the edge here and blend it in. So you could start off with maybe an opacity of 100%, and then as you work in deeper, lower the opacity. And again, every image is going to be a little bit different. And that gives us a much better transition there from one image to the next. Some of the colors from the background image can bleed through and just make it look much more natural. All right, so that's one way to do this. Now the downside to using the eraser tool is it destroys the pixels. So it's going to be harder for you to undo things and to go back. I've told you before about this little history button here. So again, it only keeps track of a certain number of of actions before you can no longer undo things. So if we were to save this, close out, come back tomorrow, and try to undo those changes, we'd be out of luck. We wouldn't be able to do that. So a better way to do this would be to use something called a layer mask. And so you'll see on my layers, you'll see some of these thumbnails that have a second thumbnail attached to it and a little chain. So those are all a layer mask. So I'm going to make sure that the layer I want to attach this to is selected. Then in the layer panel is a button. It looks like a square with a circle in it. So I'm going to click on that. It adds this white box. Everything that is white is visible. Everything that's black is not going to be visible. You can see over here, okay, it sets our colors to black and white, and we're going to switch to our brush tool. So this is about a third of the way down. Keyboard shortcut is the letter B for brush. And again, we just want to check our settings. We have a brush here. We want the hardness. We want it to be a nice soft brush for blending. Opacity, again, you could start off at 100. You could experiment with different settings there. We can resize our brush the same way as the eraser tool. But we're essentially going to paint this color that's on top, which is currently black. We're going to paint that, and it's going to have the same effect as the eraser tool. The difference is, let's say we make a change, and then we decide later on down the road, whether that's tomorrow or some other day, that we want to undo that. All we have to do is flip these colors. So you can click this little arrow here and it just flips them. And then we can undo and bring it back. So it's non-destructive. We can always undo it. So this little thumbnail here is just a mask, like a Halloween mask. Okay, you can put it on, but you can always take it off. And so that is the recommended way to blend things in. It's going to be there's some other advantages to that we'll look at down the road. One thing I want to point out is we now have two thumbnails on this layer. You can see that there's a border around this image, meaning that the mask is currently selected. When the mask is selected, we can't do all of our options. You can see they're grayed out. All right, so if you're trying to edit what's on that layer, you need to switch back to this thumbnail by just selecting it. And you'll see all your normal options should be back. So that's a little detail that you need to pay attention to. If we're trying to hide things, blend things, we want the mask selected. We could do our blending, and if you ever wanted to make further changes, you could just switch right back to that layer. So try that out. Try blending in some of your some of the things you've selected and placed on your island. Make sure that you know how to use the layer mask. That is absolutely vital and essential to the Photoshop process. So get comfortable with that. Let me know if you have questions.